And it was pretty clear to me that unless you have your core marketing message dialed in, those tactics and those channels just aren't going to matter that much. They're just not that big of needle movers. So that's when I said, okay, well, 80-20 thinking here. What works the best is core messaging. Let me stop doing everything that's not the best. And that's when I became, I was described as a T-shaped marketer, where I have a broad set of skills. I can do Facebook ads and copywriting and analytics and all that, but I really went deep on the foundational messaging side of things. And then we can segue that into your original question, which was about scaling.
So what I'm hearing then, just taking your metaphor of the river, the core marketing messaging is what's happening upstream, and everything else in terms of the tactics is downstream from that core marketing message. Is that right?
Exactly. It's all downstream.
Billy, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider Podcast. Absolutely delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Brendan. Yeah, really happy to be here.
Looking forward to a great conversation. I kick off the show with this question to all of my guests. I feel we're aligned on this given the conversations we've had off air. Our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Billy, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Yeah, I come from when I got into marketing, I got into it through the doors of copywriting, especially direct response copywriting. So in that world, scaling was always about traffic, but I see it differently now. I see it more as not so much a traffic problem, but a belief problem. And so to me, scaling is really about building belief in the mind of your customer.
I love that. It speaks directly to the very first principle of our 10 principle ScaleX framework, which is psyche. So we will be diving into this today in terms of how to appropriately influence your ideal customers towards your product or service. So for those who are not familiar with your work, Billy, can you give us a little bit of background that brought you to write simple marketing for smart people, and why you felt compelled to bring another book to the market? What was missing? So give us a flavor of your background leading up to the release of your wonderful book.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm really an unlikely marketer. My background, I have a science degree, and I worked in the energy industry for a small energy consulting company, working with big power plants and wind farms and solar panels, that kind of thing. But I always had this entrepreneurial itch and wanted to do my own thing. So I started a website on the side teaching beer brewing, of all things, because I was fresh out of college. So you drink a lot of beer in college. And my crazy roommate and I said, well, we're drinking so much, we might as well make this stuff. So we started to make it. And then, as I do, I geek out on things, started teaching it, started this website, started selling online courses. So was eventually able to leave that job and live the beer life full time for a few years running this website. But that involved learning marketing, which I thought I would be good at because I had this fancy, I had a science degree, then I got my MBA. So I had this fancy business degree and said, I can sell online beer brewing courses. Turns out I couldn't. And it was a lot harder than I expected. So that's when I dove into this world of marketing and not only figured out how to sell those beer courses, not like they made millions of dollars or anything, but they got me out of my job, but really fell in love with marketing and also saw a lot of opportunities to improve how people go about it.
I love that. And your background, I feel, resonates with so many of our listeners. I feel, unless you're from a background of marketing, we really have this love-hate relationship with marketing. We love it when it's working effectively for us, but for the most part, we hate it because it seems so complicated and so noisy. For us, we coach around a framework called our Customer for Life framework, which is embedded in our process principle, and assert that there are only three overarching processes in any business. There's the process to win the business, there's the process to deliver your business, and there's the process to ensure customer success. And I think certainly in the world that I'm in, I find that most SME leaders really are challenged with winning the business in a predictable, sustainable, and scalable way. So, You've written your book, Simple Marketing for Smart People, which I love the title of this, but what's the background? Surely smart people have got this cracked. So why simple marketing for smart people?
It's funny that name definitely it's more polarizing than I expected. Some people really don't like the simple marketing for smart people. They say it sounds pretentious, but I don't think they understand that it's actually primarily a poke at smart people. And by smart people, I don't necessarily mean a higher IQ. It's more about a disposition. These are often gifted people, academically gifted people who tend to be detail-oriented people as well. And that's great. And it really serves them well in their career. They produce phenomenal products. They really serve their clients and customers. But when you take that disposition into this murky realm of marketing, it can really cause you trouble. You know, your listeners have probably heard of this thing called the curse of knowledge. It's where you know so much about your topic that it's hard to see it from an outsider's perspective. And that might not play a huge role in your life or hold you back too much. But when you bring that curse of knowledge into marketing, it can really wreak havoc. So the book is an attempt to help that smart person, that detailed oriented person who overthinks and is overwhelmed, overcome that and really get clarity on marketing because it often feels like something really awful that they have to do. And we like to make it feel easy even and fun even.
Help us fall in love with marketing. How do you frame it in the context of scaling a business? Where do you position marketing in terms of the importance as a lever for scaling?
Yeah, so the and this goes into really the thesis behind the book. And let me first introduce something I think is going to help your listener put this in context, because that's the big breakthrough that I think the book has provided for these smart people is just looking at marketing differently. So we use a metaphor called the river metaphor, aka the upstream downstream metaphor. And so the what I realized about marketing was that I was piling up all these blog posts and these articles trying to learn everything about it. Again, common smart person problem. You try to learn everything about it before you take action. That's why I'm not like the typical like Gary Vaynerchuk kind of entrepreneur who just dives into things, right? I'm researching first. That can be a problem when it comes to marketing. But I realized that like most of the stuff I was consuming, it came from one of two categories. It was either advice about a marketing channel, which is going to be a headline that's crush it on LinkedIn, or here's how to own Instagram, something like that, or a marketing tactic. So here's how to use these countdown timers to instill urgency, or here's how to install viral share buttons on your thank you page, and just tons of frankly crap like that. And coming from the energy industry, I'm really a systems thinker, and you're always trying to get more miles to gallons, right? Literally working with engines or power plants, you want more miles per gallon. And so I said, okay, well, I know not everything is created equal. Like some things are going to give me more mileage than other things. What is that in marketing? And it was pretty clear to me that unless you have your core marketing message dialed in, those tactics and those channels just aren't going to matter that much. They're just not that big of needle movers. So that's when I said, okay, well, 80/20 thinking here. What works the best? It's core messaging. Let me stop doing everything that's not the best. And that's when I became I was described as a T-shaped marketer where I have a broad set of skills. I can do Facebook ads and copywriting and analytics and all that, but I really went deep on the foundational messaging side of things. And then we can segue that into your original question, which was about scaling.
So what I'm hearing then, just taking your metaphor of the river, the core marketing messaging is what's happening upstream, and everything else in terms of the tactics is downstream from that core marketing message. Is that right?
Exactly. It's all downstream. It's not as big a needle mover as your core marketing message.
So so let's get into this, because I know you have, and you write about this in your book, your five light bulbs framework. So how does that fit with the core marketing messaging? Let's dive into the core marketing messaging in the context of the framework that you use, and share with our listeners how we get this messaging right.
Sure. So what you want to do then, and then the question becomes, what do you do? What should this core message do? because you can have this idea of, okay, well, I have this core message, and it's kind of like having a brand manual where I create this up front and then I can distribute it downstream to all my marketing assets, my Facebook page, my website, and such. Okay, well, there's different ways to go about that. For example, Donald Miller, if you're familiar with him, he has Story Brand, and that's more of a narrative based way to create a core message. So, okay, we create our Story Brand script, and then we distribute that down to our website, our funnels, etc. What I found, and this really comes from studying this world of copywriting, is that the shape that you want your core message to take is the shape of an argument. So that's what you are doing when you're creating a core message, and that's what you're doing when you're marketing, is creating an argument, and not like a heated argument, like a throw your phone against the wall kind of an argument, but more of an Aristotle kind of an argument, a rhetorical argument. And you'll find look through all the great marketing, all the great sales pages, marketing campaigns. It's a bit hidden. You got to look with X-ray vision, but there's an argument behind those campaigns. And so what you do when you make an argument is you build belief in the mind of your prospect. So if the prospect hears your argument and they consider it, they weigh it, they're swayed by it, they now have the belief that they need in order to buy. And so that's really how I see scaling. It's not so much a traffic problem, as I said earlier. It's a belief problem. You're scaling belief.
So let's get into this then in terms of really changing the beliefs of those who you want to receive the message. What I'm hearing is, in order to reach your ideal clients in the first instance, you've got to get this messaging right. In order to do that, you've got to provoke with an argument to ultimately change the belief system of those that are receiving this. So without this sounding overly abstract, let's dive into this. So in terms of actually the scripting of the messaging in the first instance, what should that look like, and what channels should we be pushing that through then? Because my sense right now is, and I think your book is so timely, simple marketing for smart people. There are so many channels, and then we've got AI thrown in there as well. So things have become very noisy because it seems anyone can write copy. So how do we ensure in the first place we're getting our core messaging right in the context of keeping the message simple for those that need to receive it?
Right, and this is where the 5 light bulbs comes in, which is my messaging framework, which is it's very simple. Your listeners are gonna get it in just 60 seconds here, but there are many layers you can peel back on it as well.
Well, let's do that. Let's do a little mini master class on the framework.
Yep. Sure. So light bulb 1, this represents your customer status quo. So this is the stage that they're at when you reach them. They are somewhere where they have a problem, and they want to overcome that problem or challenge. And the belief that you're building here, because at each of these stages, with each of these light bulbs, again, going back to this idea of building belief, you want to build belief. So the belief you're building with light bulb 1 in the mind of your prospect is, oh, this company gets me, or this salesman, or whoever it is that is doing the speaking on behalf of the company, they really understand me. They know my situation. So that's why we call it light bulb 1 the language of empathy. You're building that belief. I get you, prospect.
And that's us speaking in the language of the customer. Now, I'm going to ask what seems like, an obvious question. How does the person who knows their product or service intimately, maybe even feels arrogant that I shouldn't have to market this. This is so wonderful that people should come to me for this. They've spent years, they're emotionally attached. They know all of the features of this because they've been intimately involved in the development. How do we then kind of detach from all of that and begin to empathize with the customer in this first light bulb in relation to really standing in the shoes of the customer and beginning to build that empathetic relationship with the customer?
Well, there's certainly tactics you can use, like having customer conversations, but I think the most important thing is your disposition and making it number one, making it a priority where the first thing you focus on is the customer and then you find products and services. Once you understand them and what they're dealing with, you can much more easily find products and services to help them overcome those challenges. So it's really got to start with the customer.
Brian, that's literally having conversations with our existing customers, understanding why they bought from us in the first instance, what problem they were trying to solve for, what need we service in relation to our product or service, so that we're starting to get the phraseology that will influence or inform our copy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, light bulb 2 then.
Right. So you have this customer or prospect who has a problem, and you know that you can solve the problem, but you also know that other people can solve the problem too, or they attempt to. They are running ads to your customers. They're sending emails to your customers. They're advertising to your customers, and it would be a mistake to not give voice to those other options. And so that's light bulb 2. It represents the other options your customer has either tried in the past, is currently trying, or is being tempted by. And so the belief that you want to instill here, assuming this is someone you can help, because there are cases where you do want to say, and Brandon, I'm sure you've been in this situation, hey, I'm not the right person for you. Actually, this guy down the road, Brandon can really help you out. Billy can really help you out. But assuming that this is someone that you're a really good fit for and they're a good fit for you, light bulb 2, the belief you're instilling is those are not the options for me. So you want to invalidate those other options.
Let's use the example of ourselves. And in simple scaling, we, at the heart of our offering and the heart of our ecosystem, we have a 12-month accelerator program. Now, when I initially engage people about that program, one of the objections is, I've done courses before. Mm-hmm. Now, what we assert in relation to our own is that, given the immersive nature, whilst I can articulate the actual practicalities of the program, 9 in-person workshops, 3 residentials, here's the guest speaker list, here's an overview of the curriculum. What we've come to know is that leaders who engage in the program feel different at the end. The challenge I have when you're trying to articulate or communicate how they're going to feel differently, I often say it's like trying to explain the color green to someone who was born without sight.
Yeah.
So how do we get through in that instance where somebody has a preconceived notion because they've tried something in the past and they're now seeing what you do through the lens of what they've tried in the past?
Well, I would almost fight that battle on a different battlefield. And that actually leads naturally into, let's keep using you as a running example. This leads naturally into the next light bulb, which is light bulb 3, which represents your unique approach. And this is the most powerful one. This is the most important one. The copywriters among your listeners will know this as Eugene Schwartz's unique mechanism. The famous copywriter Eugene Schwartz, in his book Breakthrough Advertising, he was a big inspiration for me. He talks about this. And what he says is that when you go into a really saturated market, and by the way, he was saying this back in the 50s, so he thought it was crowded back then, right? When you go into a really saturated market, everyone's making the same promises. Preview, your promise is your light bulb 5. That's the promise that you're making, right? And what he found was that the people who succeed shift their messaging from hitting on the promise over and over and over again to how the promise is achieved, aka the mechanism, or in my case, in the 5 light bulbs world, your light bulb 3. So Brendan, for you, your light bulb 3 would be your proprietary scaling framework. Remind me of the name of that. I know you have a name for it.
Our ScaleX 10 principle framework.
Right, the ScaleX 10 principle framework. Yeah. So that would be your light bulb 3. It's not your product, it's your approach. Other terminology for this, it's your framework, it's your methodology, it's your blueprint, it's your formula. In the food space, this might be the special ingredient that you use, the turmeric perhaps in the supplement. In the clothing space, this is Under Armour's Moisture Wick technology on their workout shirts. If it's shoes, it's the shock absorbers, right, that help you jump higher. So you see, it's interesting because you see the five. Your listeners will not unsee the 5 light bulbs now because you see them everywhere, and all across all different product categories. And light bulb 3 is that one that you really do see everywhere, and it's your best option for standing out. And so what you want to do, going back to your example of, if you want to better sell your light bulb 4, which is your product, better sell your light bulb 3, which is your approach. And so if you get buy-in on your approach, your framework in this case, Brendan, then you're far more likely to get buy-in when you pitch your light bulb 4, which is your product, be that a coaching program, a mastermind, a DIY course, a physical product, software, whatever it may be.
So let's recap. Step 1 is really standing in the shoes of the customer. Reaffirming and reassuring the customer that I hear you, I get you, I've been there, I've done it, I've walked in your shoes, I understand your problem. Mm-hmm. And we are crafting our copy, not in our words, full of our jargon, our technical know-how, our depth of knowledge. We're articulating that message in the customer's voice, not ours, is what I'm hearing. That helps deepen the empathy. The next is, there may be other things out there. So, we're not necessarily putting the competition down. We're simply acknowledging that there are other things out there. But in terms of light bulb number 3, we're saying this is how we approach it, which makes us uniquely different. Mm-hmm. Which leads then to the light bulb 4, which this is what we offer. So how do we then, what I'm hearing is light bulb 3 really undergirds what you are offering in our context, our 12-month ScaleX Accelerator program.
Exactly. Yes. It's where innovation comes from too. It's really you as the mad scientist in the laboratory trying to figure out a better way of doing things. And you probably agree too that your framework, Brendan, that intellectual property is more valuable than the 12-month program itself. I mean, if you're not already, you could probably turn that framework into a book, into a DIY course, into one-on-one consulting. And so those other things are commodities, right? These coaching programs, these courses. What's unique, what's not a commodity, is your intellectual property, your framework, your light bulb 3.
100%. And yes, thank you for that.
There you go. And I assume I haven't read. I'll check it out. I assume the framework either leads to your framework or the framework is in there.
Exactly, 100%. So the light bulb 4, then we're starting to speak about our product or service. Anything specific that we want to amplify in there based on leveraging the approach in light bulb 3?
Well, you want to, and it's a good question. That's a big mistake people make, is that they don't bridge that gap between the light bulb 3 and the light bulb 4. And so we just ran, speaking of like programs, we just ran a cohort, and this was a big thing when we were giving feedback on the messaging that our participants missed. Was they made this great argument for their light bulb 3. They're making claims around it. They're backing it up with proof. They're busting myths about the light bulb 2s. But then they get to the light bulb 4 and outlining their offer, and it barely mentions the light bulb 3. And it's like, well, you just sold me on this light bulb 3 thing. Where is that in your offering? And it makes sense that if you really found a better way of doing things, a better formula, a better recipe, a better framework, that would be alive within your program. So you really want to look at your light bulb 4 as a vehicle for your light bulb 3. So it's how you make it easier to implement your better way of doing things.
So again, indulging myself here for the benefit of the listeners, I hope, our light bulb for our ScaleX Accelerator program is built around our approach, which is light bulb 3, our 10 principles ScaleX framework. So all of the workshops are aligned to each of the principles that we have enshrined in our ScaleX 10 principle framework.
Perfect. Yeah, that's how it's done.
Brilliant. So which takes us on then to the final light bulb.
Yeah, so that the final light bulb 5 is really the flip of light bulb 1. So it's that other side of the bridge where the sun is shining, the birds are chirping. But it's also one that a lot of people in our community fail to give voice to, not because they don't care about it, but because they care so much that they're so close to their product and they know that their product can help their prospect that they kind of think, well, it's assumed, like my prospect just knows what this is going to do for them. And you really don't want to assume things in marketing and copywriting. So definitely give voice to your light bulb 5, because with that, you're answering the question that they have, which is, what's in it for me?
Yeah, I love that. So what I'm hearing is we're moving from light bulb one, which is empathizing with the customer's problem, to light bulb five, which is the transformation. Uh, and the light bulbs in between take the potential customers on that journey. I love this framework. I'm a fan of a good
Thank you.
framework or methodology, but I love this. I love the simplicity of this. So in terms of the transformation, Billy, how are we communicating this? What I get a sense that if we're telling the customers, this is what they're going to get, um,
Mhm.
it will not be as impactful if they hear it from the customers themselves. So tell us a little bit about how we share that transformation and what is in it for the customers themselves.
Yeah, and this goes back to your original question about scaling. And so what you want to do is decide who you are targeting in terms of their current beliefs. So let's pretend that someone has been on your email list a while and they've heard about your framework over and over again. You've sold them on your framework. They love it. They're totally bought in on it, but they still haven't joined your paid program yet. Well, the beliefs that they need there kind of go back to the ones that you were hitting on, Brendan, around the program and how it's supported and the modules and the feedback they're gonna get and everything. So in that case, you're really going to be hitting on light bulb 4. You need to build, and these are more like the typical sales objections, which makes sense because light bulb 4 is the one that has your product included. So that's the sales light bulb, if you want to put it that way. Now you take someone else who has no idea who you are, they've never heard of your framework before, you have much more education that you need to be doing with this person. They might not even know that they have a problem yet. So in that case, you need to change your messaging. It's probably going to be more like light bulb 1 messaging, really just help them identify with that problem. And then you can start to lead them into your other light bulbs, eventually to the point that you once again arrive at that light bulb 4, your offer.
So let's get into some of the tactics. Again, we'll continue with simple scaling and our ScaleX offering as an example here. We have our book, we have this podcast, obviously, which is free. We have email newsletter. We have a very active LinkedIn channel where on a daily basis we're delivering value for free. We're putting this out across, certainly the podcast out across lots of different channels, all the podcast mediums like Spotify, Apple iTunes, across YouTube, TikTok, all of that. I mean, how do we know which to really dial up? Because there's lots of channels, and we feel that, and for many of our listeners out there, uh, there are lots of ways to actually engage with our customers in these myriad of channels.
Yeah, and that's why we don't channels are important, but we deprioritize them and just don't care about them so much because we're more focused on creating that core message. And so the idea is like once we have that core message together, where all these 5 light bulbs are filled out. In the 5 light bulbs world, we call it a messaging map. So that's the actual tangible document that we create, and it has your 5 light bulbs filled out. And once we have that filled out, it's kind of like, okay, well, let's go serve our customers this message. And at that point, you're really just you're setting it down as many channels as you can, because some people are only going to hear your message over YouTube. Some people are only going to hear your message over podcasting. Now there are considerations there as well. There's real business considerations like, okay, what are our available resources? We can't possibly produce a YouTube channel and a podcast at the same time. We also have to look at the funnel stats. Okay, who's coming from these channels? How are they converting and everything? But the big idea is once you have that message dialed in, shout it from the mountaintops, and that includes using all available channels.
You mentioned at the outset the importance of storytelling. Tell me a little bit more about this in the context of actually crafting our core messaging.
How storytelling fits in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, we look at marketing as making an argument. And I know that can sound kind of cold, but a good example is a lawyer in a courtroom. Okay, so that's the role you are assuming essentially. So you're the lawyer in the courtroom making an argument to the judge or the jury. And so your customers are, let's say it's the judge. So your customer is the judge, and they're judging whether or not they buy this argument that you're making. And so in your argument, you're going to be making all sorts of claims. So if you have a defendant, if your client is someone who was picked up for shoplifting and you're trying to get a reduced sentence, you might make a claim and say something like, well, Jimmy is trying to turn his life around. It's like, okay, well, that's a claim you're making. Let me see, what does a claim demand? It demands proof or evidence. So where's the evidence that this kid is trying to turn his life around? I'm going to throw the book at him. And then you as a lawyer might say, oh, well, here is Exhibit A, an exam paper from his local college where he got an A plus. So he's really trying. He just had this slip up, right? So you have different forms of evidence, and a story is a form of evidence as well. It's not what scientists normally think about when they think about evidence. That's more hard evidence, forensic evidence. But we're not talking about science. We're not talking about a crime scene investigation. We're talking about influencing human beings, and often the thing that influences us most are stories. And so that's how we see storytelling fit in. It's just one of multiple forms of proof or evidence that we can use to help make our argument. But I'm glad you asked about it because it's my absolute favorite one, and I would say the most effective.
Have you a bias to it because of your initial kind of career in copywriting, or how important do you feel it should be for those listening who, let's say they're leading an engineering business? How important is storytelling as opposed to an agency? How important is storytelling for that leader, that engineering leader who wishes to scale his engineering business as opposed to, let's say, an agency?
I was biased more towards that other way, that more left brain way of looking at it because of my science background and my engineering background. I was more like, okay, show me the physical evidence, show me the scientific studies, double blind controlled study. That's the gold standard. But then getting more into copywriting, you realize this, right? We know this in our everyday lives. So if we're trying to find the best laundromat in town or the best dry cleaner, there could be a scientific study that was done, a sample of all the dry cleaners here in San Diego County. And the one that scientifically was the best at getting the stains out was this one right next door to me here. I could be on the way there, and then my brother pulls up and he goes, "Nah, don't go there. Let me tell you a story about that place. They really stink, right?" I'm not going to that place despite the scientific study. So I think stories work even for, what we advise in our 5 Light Bulbs programs is to throw in all forms of proof. Throw in a story, but then follow up with a statistic. Bring in an authoritative source. But the stories definitely work on more engineering brains as well, if you tell them right.
So what I'm hearing is throw in the quantitative, demonstrable evidence that what you're claiming is actually backed up here. For us, what we're seeing from those who engage in our program is on average a 29% increase in revenue in the 3 years post graduation from the program. All of those who have participated in the program cite a 100% increase in their confidence levels around scaling in terms of their beliefs now have changed in relation to their confidence levels. So we have gone out, we have gathered this evidence, we've spoken to our customers, and we've brought it back. And it's a mix of quantitative plus qualitative. Like some will say, it's life changing. So what I'm hearing from you is, ensure you've got the quantitative stuff, the fact-based stuff, the objective stuff that can be demonstrated in the courtroom, plus the qualitative, which is the kind of the anecdotes that are captured from your customers about how their problem has been solved through your approach, your product, and wrap this up in a story.
Yes, I would frame it a little bit differently. So I would say you can use a story as a form of proof to back up your claims, but it's just one form of proof. I would also advise you to definitely include evidence around your program, your offering. But remember also that's downstream, and that's once they're ready to accept your offer. So that's once you've hit on these other light bulbs, like their light bulb one, where you display empathy. It's ideally you're presenting your offer to someone who's been sold on your approach, your light bulb 3, your framework. And so that brings in this idea that there's different evidence that you want to present that's not just related to your offering. So I can give an example here. So one of the arguments that I was making when I was teaching beer brewing, and this was a little bit later on, I started with like the more, once I learned about this stuff, the more basic, okay, well, the goal of this program is to help you brew awesome beer. And if I wanted to make that promise even stronger, it would be like really awesome beer, right? But then I started to figure out what really worked when it came to creating awesome beer. And what I found was that, so I got my beer judge certification. So I have this fun hobby where it's not paid, although I'm paid in beer, which is even better. I judge competitions, beer competitions, and give feedback to it's mainly home beer brewers on what works and what doesn't work.
I think there's a lot listening now, Billy, saying that must be the best job in the world, judging a beer competition.
I wish I could do it full time. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Although, keep in mind that there are a lot of bad beers that you judge as well. People often submit these to get feedback on what to improve. But when I went through that training, and it was like a really intense, it was a whole year of training for this thing, learning all these different styles, training your palate and such. My own beer got a whole lot better. Surprise, surprise. And so what I discovered was that the better you can critique your beer, the better beer you're going to brew. It provides you with a feedback mechanism, right? You can taste something in a commercial beer, in a Guinness from your neck of the woods, and say, oh man, that coffee flavor, I really like that. I want to put that into my beer. And so I started to make this argument that the best way to improve your beer is to improve your beer palate. Now, that has nothing to do with my offering. Yes, I did sell a beer tasting course, but this was upstream of that. But they wouldn't care about the course unless they had the belief that the best way to improve their beer is to improve their palate. So what I had to do was provide proof to back up that claim that the best way to improve it is to improve your palate. One of those things that I did to bring in that authority form of proof that I mentioned earlier was I brought in a professional perfumer of all things. So I found this guy who actually makes perfumes for a living. They call him the nose, because most of what you taste is actually through your nose. That sounds weird. It's your you only taste about 4 or 5 different flavors. Most of these aromatics, like if you're going to get citrus or you're going to get chocolate, coffee, comes through your nose. And so that overcame the objection that a lot of people had, which was, well, I can't improve my palate. It's a fixed thing. And so I brought in this authoritative figure, despite having this nickname of the nose. It sure sounds like he was born with it. First thing he said was, no, it was acquired. And this is something that you can learn. And it's actually not as difficult as you think to learn how to pick up these different flavors. So do you see how once I had buy-in on that, on my recommended way of doing things, improving your palate to improve your beer, only then did it make sense to put my paid beer tasting course in front of them.
Yeah, so again, I'm relating it back to our own offering, the ScaleUp Institute, which is the not-for-profit research body here in the United Kingdom. We don't have it in the south of Ireland, but we have it for the United Kingdom. Cite that less than 1% of the 5.7 million small to medium-sized businesses existent in the UK ever achieve scaling. So less than 1%. So already we've got this independent authority citing that scaling must be challenging. Of only it's actually 0.5% of SMEs are scaling. And lack of ambition of the leader is cited as the single greatest impediment. A lack of ambition being a mindset, which is why psyche is the very first principle that we speak about. The leader's psyche either empowers their scaling trajectory or disempowers it. So we lean heavily on that. We know this firsthand that your psyche, your mindset is so critically important. But that's leaning on. That's not kind of because we're saying that. That's leaning on this body of evidence coming from this independent authority called the ScaleX Institute. So I think that's what I'm hearing. We've got our own we've got our quantifiable evidence. We've got our qualitative evidence in terms of the anecdotes, and then we've got this independent authority who's affirming certainly our approach.
Yeah, so that would be a good. Yeah, if it's, I didn't hear if it was about your approach. What I heard was that a lot of, I heard a great light bulb one piece of evidence or a light bulb one form of proof. So remember that light bulb, you're instilling the belief that I get you, prospect, and you want them to feel as part of that, I'm not alone. And so what I heard was a great statistic that proves to them, because studies were done on this, I am not alone as a business owner who's struggling to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. We always say, if you're in a room with 100 SMB leaders, only one has achieved scale. So, the in terms of the mistakes that SME leaders, those who have aspirations to scale, make, what do you see as kind of the top three mistakes that we're making when it comes to marketing our products or services?
Well, I think the biggest one, and what I'm trying to provide here is a different perspective on it, and it's this idea of scaling via belief. I think you'll find that you can use a lot of mechanics to scale. So you can use traffic sources, you can use paid traffic, you can form joint ventures, you can take on investments, you can do mergers and acquisitions, all that. Really, what I've discovered from doing this messaging work is that there's really nothing more powerful than belief. And I believe and I know that's kind of vague. What I mean by that is making this argument, having a piece of intellectual property that you put forth that travels through people's minds and sticks in their minds. And this is, and we know this from, again, this world of direct response copywriting. Think about these, a lot of these companies have come and gone, but these ad campaigns have lasted for decades. You think about the Volkswagen, the Think Small campaign, or the Dos Equis Man campaign. Well, that came from a campaign that David Ogilvy created back in, I think, the 60s. And that was the man in the Hawthorne shirt, right? So these ideas, they're almost like memes. They get remixed, but it's these ideas that stick into people's minds. Copywriters even have a phrase for this. It's like the holy grail in copywriting. They call it the big idea. Again, it's vague, but it is a tough thing to nail down. But these concepts, these
Rob?
Yep, Benny, I'm here.
Yeah, Billy has dropped out.
Yeah, we just lost him there, so I'll just sit tight for a minute, see if he. It was starting to just about a minute or two before he jumped off.
from these ad campaigns and this idea of a really powerful way to think about scaling is by owning your own intellectual property.
So in terms of our own intellectual property, for those who are listening, we want to ensure that this doesn't sound abstract in the context of marketing. So what specifically are we referring to then when we say their own intellectual property and how they should leverage that from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, this doesn't necessarily mean you need some kind of trademark term, but you at least want to have an argument that you're putting forth. And you think about it goes back to your example, Brendan, how you have your light bulb 3, which we said is much more valuable even than your light bulb 4, having this framework. There's a great company I used as a case study for this. They're called You Need a Budget, YNAB. And they've been around for 20 years. This is a bootstrap software company. They've been around for 20 years in the budgeting space. Like, talk about like easy to dethrone someone from the budgeting space with the better app. So the question is, how have they remained? How have they been such a strong company? Well, because they have this intellectual property, they make an argument. They have a way of doing things. They call it the four rules. It's their four rules of budgeting. It's things like plan for a rainy day. It's not rocket science, but they built all their content around it. They have courses around it. They have podcasts around it, and they have their software app around it. So while they are selling their way of doing things, their four rules, their competitors are just selling the bells and whistles and features of their app. And so having this argument that you put forth, which again, it's not tangible, but this is also why if you look at a balance statement for a company, the brand, it's not tangible, but it's often the most valuable thing on that balance sheet. I mean, look at Coca-Cola. The most valuable thing they have is a concept. It's their brand. And again, it doesn't need to be a Coca-Cola, but it does need to be some kind of an argument that you're making, that you're putting out there. And then you can sell whatever product you want around it, from software to coaching to physical products even.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it speaks directly to our own approach in the context of integrating the 10 principles of scaling, of successful scaling within our 10 principle ScaleX framework. And I think of, for example, the Wim Hof method. I'm a Wim Hof method instructor, and
there you go.
Breath work has been around since the dawn of time, since the first man on the planet took a breath, the first mammal on the planet took a breath, and what Wim has done incredibly well, or certainly his people, is created this three-pillar framework, which is mindset, breath work, and cold exposure. And now millions of people are practicing the method across the world. But until he had labeled the Wim Hof method with those three pillars, Wim was looked upon as some kind of circus act who was trying to encourage us to do cold exposure. And then he created a framework, to your point, then leveraged the scientific community, began to get this third-party independent evidence that supported his claims within the three-pillar method. And now we have people all around the globe who are practicing breathwork as a result.
Yeah, and he's a great example. I love that you bring that up. That he's one of the examples that we use when we show a good light bulb 3. And so he could have just been a guy making an argument for cold exposure and probably would have done pretty well. So again, going back to everyone making the same promises, what do you say that's different? Well, everyone's promising get healthy, get healthy, get healthy, get healthy. Everyone's got their way of doing it. The paleo diet, cardio, lifting heavy. Wim comes in and makes an argument for cold therapy. And yes, breathing also. And so he could have stopped there. And that's what I mean. If all he did was say, hey, there's a better way to solve this problem and to achieve these benefits is from cold therapy, that would have been much better than just promoting his online course and all its included features and the modules and the videos and the community and all that. He has something, and he gave it a name in these three pillars. So now it's really turned into more of a brand and a movement.
Yeah, again, leaning on Wim as an example. I had Wim on the podcast. I mean, there are many problems which they speak about in terms of standing in the customer's shoes initially, whether that be depression, stress, autoimmune conditions. There are many different problems. The transformation is ultimately feeling much more empowered and feeling happier, healthier, and stronger. Their approach is the Wim Hof method, which is leaning on nothing new, but this integrative approach of breathwork, mindset, and cold exposure. And so that's very lucid for me in terms of actually helping explain or amplify the 5 light bulb method.
Great example.
So before we move into the close, Billy, I mean, what's one thing you hope that our listeners will take away from this? If there was only one thing that you advocate they go and apply now or change now, what would that be to start to give them greater leverage within their marketing?
Well, in this age of AI, there are no shortage of shiny objects out there. I talked about the marketing channels, the marketing tactics, and of course we have to put AI in the mix too. But again, think about it as being downstream. it's not nearly as important as having that core message dialed in. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by marketing, maybe ask yourself, am I overwhelmed by a marketing channel? Am I overwhelmed by some tactics that I'm just really knee deep in that are smothering me? Is it AI I'm getting caught in? And if so, go back and ask, okay, well, what am I really trying to say here? What am I really trying to argue for? And once you figure that out, then you can amplify that message via channels, tactics, and AI.
Yeah, I love that. Before we move into the close, mentioned AI a few times. How can we leverage AI in relation to really, really applying the 5 light bulbs?
There are many ways. I mean, we're using AI in 1,000 different ways with the 5 light bulbs. One of the things you can do without even knowing the light bulbs is, again, we take this approach where you're making an argument. Well, it's a common technique to have a debate partner help you strengthen your argument. So that's a cool thing you can do is just ask your AI, hey, here's the argument that I'm making. Be my skeptical customer, be a debate partner, and try to poke holes in it. And you'll get some interesting, if yes, painful responses.
That's brilliant. I love that. In terms of the two greatest objections, I feel, or I don't have the time, and or I don't have the money. How can the 5 light bulb method overcome or neutralize those objections?
Again, I would fight the battle upstream. You know, we found that when we give more, I would look for objections around your light bulb 3, if anything. What are the claims you're making around your light bulb 3, around your approach? And what are the objections to that? Because you'll find that we really try to get buy-in on that light bulb 3. And once you find that, you'll find that those other objections really weren't the objections because they're so sold on this thing. They'll make the call times, they'll pay the money or whatever it is. So yeah, you know, that you can read any sales book and they help a lot with those sort of downstream objections around price and guarantee and time to completion and all that stuff. Where the 5 light bulbs really shines is these more upstream objections, and you handle those, and you'll find you won't have so many downstream objections.
Brilliant. Love that. Billy, is there anything else before we move into the close that you feel you would like to share with our listeners? You feel that it's important to share that we haven't covered off today?
Yeah, and not to like preach or anything, but you know, we live in a really it's a shady world. It's a shady marketing world that we're in, and I was really turned off by a lot of the stuff, and you know, and I followed a lot of things and did things that looking back on it, and I was like, that was just kind of icky. And so, but it was like an expert that told me to do it. And so, you know, remember that just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. And a lot of the advice that you're getting on marketing out there crosses ethical lines where I think you would say, I think if we were to all follow the golden rule and say, well, I'm about to do this thing, would I want someone to do this to me? We'd say, nah, I don't think so. And so this is something I've really been hitting on a lot recently, especially because marketing has really been overtaken by psychology and buyer psychology and neuroscience and this very scientific way of looking at human beings where we're trying to. I saw an ad the other day. It's like how to get a dopamine spike in your prospect's mind. It's like I don't want to be treated like a lab rat. You know, I want to be treated like a human who has dignity and can understand an argument, right? And think for myself and make an informed decision. So that's also why I really believe in this argumentation-based approach because it assumes that your customer is intelligent. If someone can process an argument, you're assuming that they're smart. So I'd rather make an honest argument to someone rather than trying to spike their dopamine.
Here. I love that.
I could rant on that for a while, as you can probably tell. So good question.
You know what really strikes me, and this is so welcome in this world. You approach it. You've come to this with a scientific lens. I suspect a huge amount of skepticism initially, because of that lens, and you now speak to the importance of your approach with a huge degree of integrity and authenticity, and I really value that, and I suspect, speaking on behalf of our listeners, they will also value that. So I really appreciate that. On that note, can you share with our audience 3 timeless takeaways?
Three timeless takeaways. Yeah. So one is to focus on belief change, because it doesn't matter if they don't have the beliefs needed to buy, then you can throw all the coupons you want at them, but they're just going to bounce off of them. Two, I would say, study the people who came before us. I think we sort of discriminate against our ancestors these days, just because they didn't have iPhones, they weren't as smart as us. I would say no, they were smarter than us in a lot of ways. And so I mentioned the old copywriters, study them, Ogilvy, Gary Halbert, even a more recent one. But go way back, go back to Aristotle and the Greeks. Study argumentation and rhetoric. And let's see, three, I would say balance courage as an entrepreneur with humility. We tend to be very driving, headstrong people. We take risks, but don't be dumb, and take calculated risks. And also know that it's more about just taking the next step each day versus hitting a big home run every time. That's a lesson I had to learn the hard way.
Here, here. Billy, looking ahead, what's next for you?
Oh, so we're just creating a lot of messaging maps around here. That's our thing. So we have this 5 light bulbs framework. We're bringing a lot of people from the book who really resonate with this approach. So it's not about the messaging map. It's about what it stands for, which is getting people clarity on their marketing message. And we've just seen so many great benefits unfold from that. So that's our focus.
Brilliant. Well, look, I want to thank you for showing up as you have done today, as I mentioned earlier, with a huge degree of integrity, authenticity, humility, and an incredible amount of wisdom. So if anyone, Billy, out there, and I suspect there'll be many, want to learn more about your work, how best to connect with you?
Yeah, best place to start is with the book, Simple Marketing for Smart People, and that will tell you, hey, I resonate with this guy Billy's approach, or not. In which case there are plenty of other people speaking about marketing out there. But if this talk resonated with you, give it a shot. It's a quick read, and I think you'll dig it.
Brilliant. Well, look, it's so welcome, as I said right at the outset, in a very, very noisy world at the moment. There are lots of different marketing tactics being bandied about, and it's hugely confusing and frustrating for those SME leaders who are simply trying to get their wonderful product or service into the hands of those customers that need them. So it's a refreshing approach, and I wish you every success with it, Billy.
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, I really enjoyed the interview and all your questions.
Oh, thank you. Take care.